Okay, so I think we are now ready to start. Please have your seats. You are warmly welcome to our gender session. The session is both a hybrid. It's a hybrid session with in-person, and we have our other guests online who are already logged in. From the registration of the Gendercide event online, we had over 120 people registering in. A round of applause for that. And also, I want to take this opportunity to thank you who have prioritized this session. I know there are many other sessions that are going on, but you have chosen to come to the agenda session for a specific purpose. And we will request that each one of us who has come in, please sign up on the registration lists, which are on the tables. In case you don't have any registration list, please just put up your hand so that as a list can come to you. I'll request Elizabeth to please take the lists around for registration. And for those who are online, kindly put your name, your country from where you're logging in from, and your organization. We would also appreciate if you could also send your email so that in case you need a recording or you need any additional information, we are able to reach out to you. This session is powered by very high dignitaries. Some are in the room already and others are online. I want to appreciate and acknowledge the support of African Women in Agricultural Research for Development Award, which has sponsored this event. A round of applause for them. We would not be in this room if Award hadn't supported us. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the people that we worked with on the technical side. That is the AFAS, Gender Technical Working Group, the CADAP XP4, Gender Technical Working Group, and Award staff, especially Dr. Margaret Mangeni and Miss Anne Mamo, who have supported. We have this event on the different social media handles. We are on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and we have also shared with you all these handles so that you can log in, make your comments, and we will be very appreciative of your comments because this will also help us improve on our content, but also on our process. So as we begin this session, I take this opportunity to thank our chairperson who will be chairing the whole session. This is none other than Dr. Podisi. A round of applause for him. He is the CADAP XP4 Regional Coordinator. He works with CADESA, and you will hear a lot more about him when he introduces himself. I would also request those who are going to present, who are in the room, to please come on the podium. We have the AFAS Executive Director, who is our host, and is going to be represented by Dr. Rwamigisa Patience. Please, Dr. Rwamigisa, please come and take your seat as you give us the welcome remarks. We also have in the room Elizabeth Asimwe, who will remain on her laptop supporting the online delegates. Thank you. We have Collins Chemtai. Please, just your hand. Yeah, he is supporting us on the technical. So in case you have a technical hitch, then you can just send a message, a chat to Colin. We also have the Malawi MAFAS team led by Eugene Emmanuel. Yeah, he is supporting the whole IT section. So he is our support this session. Without wasting a lot of time, I'll request that we now dive into our session, and I'll request that we put out the opening slide. Emmanuel or Colin, please put out the opening slide so that we can know the focus of this session. Yeah, as he puts out the session, we have different delegates from different countries. We have those who are coming from Uganda. A round of applause for them. Please, by show of hands. Uganda, yes. We have from Cameroon, I can see Nesta. Cameroon, thank you for coming. Any other countries that are represented in our agenda session? Kenya? Ethiopia, please. A round of applause for Ethiopia. Then Kenya, I can see Mrs. Kamau, our board member. Thank you for coming. Which other country? Ghana, please. A round of applause for Ghana. And which other country? DRC. Pardon? Oh, Senegal, please. A round of applause to Senegal. Nigeria, do we have anyone from Nigeria? Oh, Nigeria. Thank you for coming. Okay, and our hosts, a round of applause for Malawi, our hosts. Thank you very much. Okay. Our opening slide seems to be coming a bit late, so I'll proceed and just share the. This one is done. Okay, so this event, I'll just use our okay, so this side event is basically, yeah, thank you. Now, those are our speakers on the screen. We have the keynote speaker, Dr. Susan Carrier, the director for awards, who have sponsored this gender side event. We have our host, AFAS, Dr. Slim Nadi, who is the executive director of AFAS and is represented by Dr. Ramigisa Patience in this meeting. We have the presenters or the chair for the session, that is Dr. Batisi Kingsley Podisi. And we have Karen Monoko, who is also online and will be sharing with us about the women-led initiatives, a study that she conducted with the support of CADAP XP4 and the CIRA Lift. We have Dr. Mariam Maiga from CORAF. She will be our key discussant for the session. We also have Dr. Romana Ane, who is from Kenya, award fellow, who will be sharing with us evidence-based policy analysis results or some findings. We have Grace Chilongo, who is Malawian but is not able to be here in physical. She will be coming in tomorrow, the other day, and she will be presenting also some work on policy analysis This is gender responsive policy that she has been supported with from award. Later, we will have the closing remarks by Gifty Gwila, the vice chairperson of the AFAS board. So these are our distinguished speakers, and you had already heard from the facilitators. So our main focus for the session is, the first one is advancing gender responsive strategies and women-led innovations in food safety and nutrition by harnessing opportunities in biodiversity and agroecology to build inclusive, resilient, and sustainable food systems. The session that was just before this was on agroecology. So what we are doing is we are advancing the gender responsive strategies. Are those strategies that you have been discussing in the agroecology gender responsive? Are they inclusive? So that's why that's one of our focus for this session. Then we also want to foster scalable gender responsive agriculture extension and advisory services initiatives for inclusive public, private sector driven, commercialized, industrialized, and transformed agri-food systems. And lastly, we want to promote evidence. Everyone is looking for evidence, evidence-based, gender responsive agriculture extension and advisory services policies and legal frameworks for equitable public, private sector-led extension. So without much ado, I'll hand over to our session chair, Dr. Podisi, to take us to the next steps. A round of applause for Dr. Podisi.
So this lady is not around.
They are all around.
Yeah, yes.
Online.
Online. Thank you, Adeline. I think, as I've already been introduced, my name is Baisi Podisi from the CADESA Secretariat. I coordinate the CADAP XP4 program there. I'll be the chair for this session. And as we start, I think the people who needed to be up front here are all here. So the rest of them will be joining us online. When we start off, we are going to get our remarks from the AFAS director, who will be represented here by the AFAS board member, Patience Ramigisa. Following his remarks, we'll get a keynote address, which will be done virtually, which will be focusing on scaling up gender responsive agricultural extension and advisory services and women-led innovations for inclusive public, private sector-driven agricultural commercialization, industrialization, and transform agri-food systems. This will be by Dr. Susan Karia, who's the director for award. This will be followed by a presentation by Ms. Karen Mnoko to us based on a study that she did on gender, on agricultural development and women-led innovations. And also by the same, which will be focusing on a case study, this one focusing on South Sudan and another one in Burkina Faso. So the other speakers will be talking to us on gender responsive extension policies, looking at empirical data from policy analysis, looking at the gaps, opportunities, and recommendations. So we'll end this with reflections by Dr. Maiga. Dr. Maiga is the Regional Gender and Social Development Advisor from CORAF, who will be joining us online. And lastly, we'll close this session with some remarks from Gifty Gwila, who has had to step out to the airport, but she has a recording on her remarks, which will be rendered towards the end of this session. So without much ado, ladies and gentlemen, join me as we welcome Dr. Patience Ramigisa, who will be making brief remarks on behalf of the AFAS director. Over to you, Doc.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wish on behalf of AFAS to welcome all of you to this very important session. As many of you may be aware, gender issues in agriculture are very important. If we are going to advance and foster and promote technology uptakes, it is very important that gender is integrated. But one of the most important challenges we face to get gender effective. If I use my country, Uganda, as an example, our public sector, when you go to universities in agricultural sciences, you find women are also about 20–30%. Then now you have even the 15% that we have recruited are deployed in rural, in urban and semi-urban areas. Meaning virtually the rural women who are really form the bulk of the labor force don't access their fellow women professionally in technology. And therefore, and yet studies have shown that women farmers are more responsive to their fellow women extension agents. So that is one of the paradoxes we face. And I would really think we need to think innovatively how to get the women also respond to men's advice as they respond to women's advice in the current circumstances. So I think that is one of the issues I think I would put before you people, to really innovatively think, how do we make women respond to men's advice as they would do to women? So I don't want to take a lot of your time, because I have seen a long list of presentations. I wish to thank you for turning up for this Agriculture Extension, 7th Agriculture Extension Week here in Malawi. And on behalf of AFAS, I also want to thank Award for sponsoring this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, board member. Thank you for those points for us to reflect on how we can get our women folk in the rural areas to be easily persuaded by our male extension agents. So as we move on, I also want to acknowledge the participants, the audience that is joining online, and of course our resource persons who will be talking online. And at this juncture, let me welcome Dr. Susan Karia, who's the Director for African Women in Agricultural Research and Development Award, who will give us the keynote address. Over to you, Doc. I hope she's there online. She logged on earlier.
I am online.
So just she'll be making her presentation online.
Can you now see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. And first of all, congratulations to AFAS for organizing the 7th Africa-wide Agriculture Extension Week. And also congratulations for making gender a prominent topic during the week. I'm very, very pleased to see that. And thank you for inviting me to talk on scaling up gender responsive agriculture extension and advisory services and women-led innovations for inclusive public, private sector-driven agriculture commercialization, industrialization, and transformed agri-food system. I suspect I'll probably be talking in the context of transformed agri-food systems more than all the other parts. Next. Okay, that's not working. Let me try. Okay, so I'm going to talk about, in general, 4 things. The first one is really emphasizing the important role that women play in agri-food systems, i.e. making a case that we need to consider them as important clienteles for our agriculture extension and advisory services. But then I will also highlight some of the key gender gaps in agri-food systems that make them much more vulnerable and much less able to really benefit or to access agriculture extension services. And then I'll talk very specifically also around some of the gaps and some of the challenges women farmers face in terms of accessing agriculture extension and advisory services. And then I highlight a few areas for action. So we award together with FAO and the Natural Resources Institute are in the process of finalizing a report. And it's a report that looks at the status of women in agri-food systems in sub-Saharan Africa. These are emerging findings from the report, but the report is going to be launched this year during the African Food Systems Forum. So key issues at play. The first one is that agri-food systems in sub-Saharan Africa depend on women's labor. And just under half, about 49% of all agri-food systems workers in sub-Saharan Africa are women. And this is 11% higher than the global average. Now, when I talk here, I'm talking about agri-food systems workers in terms of agriculture employment, but also off-farm agri-food systems workers. So let's look again. If we look at we find that women are 45% of the people who are in agriculture employment. That is how much their labor they contribute to agriculture. And here we are talking about crop production, livestock, fisheries, forestry, all the above. The report finds that the highest percentages are in Central and Eastern Africa. Secondly, the report also finds that women are 59% of the food systems workers. And here we are talking beyond primary production. We are talking about processing, we're talking about trading, etc. And the highest here is in West Africa, of course, and we also know that the growth in this sector, in all farm agri-food systems, employment is due to the growth in agro-industry development. We have all the commercialization policies, but we also have increasing urbanizations and rising incomes. Now, while they play such an important role, one of the things we find is that there are substantial gender gaps. And when we look at the gender gaps, we are thinking because they play multiple roles, yeah? They are in subsistence production, they're in commercial farming, they're in processing, they're in fruit vending. There are substantial gender gaps when we look across all that. The first one, when we look at women's agri-food systems work, we find it's often precarious. They are overrepresented among irregular workers, they are lower paid, part-time, and even lower skilled workers, often experiencing poorer working conditions. And of course, some of the findings we see is that women's wages are even less than men's for similar work. This is an example we have from Rwanda. In addition, another issue that's really important is around the work burden, the women's work burden. So in all the countries for which we have any data, we find that women spend significantly more time in unpaid domestic and care work than men. What this does is it's limiting the time they have available to go for trainings or the time they have available to undertake remunerative work or even leisure. Next, when we look at women's land rights, we find that there are substantial gender inequalities relating to land throughout sub-Saharan Africa. And here we are looking at ownership to land, but we're also looking at whether there's a legal framework that is protecting women's land rights. What this means is that if women don't have secure rights to land, it limits their ability to adopt climate smart technologies, or it limits how much they want to invest in the adoption of technologies. The report also finds that there are substantial gender gaps in mobile usage and ownership in Africa. And the statistics are really scary, ranging from 6% in Senegal to 11% in Egypt. But in addition to that, even when you look at internet usage, again, there are substantial gaps. What this does is it's limiting how we can use ICT or technologies to really, how we can leverage it to improve access to agriculture extension and advisory services. And finally, the gender disparities in participation and leadership. And I was very happy that the speaker who made the opening remarks talks about this. Where are women? I know my statistics here are around researchers, but for extension services, it's the same. And the challenge here is also in terms of leadership, the lack of women's leadership in food systems. And I want to challenge us not to convince women to accept extension services from men. I want to challenge us to increase the number of women in agriculture extension services. So now let me also look at some of the very specific challenges that women may face in terms of accessing and benefiting from agriculture extension and advisory services. The first one is this lack of recognition that women are actually legitimate farmers. So they are our clients, that we are designing innovations for them. And every so often I'll be in a meeting and they'll call the farmer he, and then they'll put a picture of a woman. But actually the statistics I've just shown you very clearly show that women are contributing to agri-food systems and they are legitimate clients. The second area, of course, I talked about it, is I've talked about women's time, but what I didn't talk about are mobility constraints. This is because often women may not be able to travel far away from home to attend meetings, or they may also be having other family responsibilities, so they may not be able to attend the trainings or other types of activities around agriculture extension. Another area is around adult women's literacy. We know there has been great progress, but what we find and still find in rural areas is that women have lower average rates of literacy than men. And this really limits their participation in trainings, especially if we're using written material. And in addition to that, there may be language barriers, because often rural women don't speak the national language. They'll speak their local language. So if the activity is being conducted in, for example, if you're in Kenya, in Kiswahili, you may lose some rural women in some parts of the country. So it's really important to think about the language that the language of the agriculture extension and advisory services is using. Another area is we know that participation in rural organizations is really important for accessing all this information. However, if you look at a mixed group, you may find that women may be underrepresented, and sometimes they may not also be in leadership positions, so they can't really be pushing for their agendas. So this is another area we need to think of. So it might mean that they end up being excluded from these services. And finally, I know we always think, oh, the agriculture extension providers, they are refusing to integrate gender. But actually, the truth is often they lack the knowledge, the capacities, and resources that really would enable them to target women much more effectively. And then, of course, I needed to add this, and this has come out very clearly in the report that we are preparing, that discriminatory social norms and gender norms really underpin the inequalities that continue to persist in sub-Saharan Africa. And they define the gender roles for domestic care work, for productive work. They will define who has access and use, and who makes decisions about what labor is used where, who owns which assets, what information is available, mobility, what food is consumed by whom. So we cannot, if we're going to have change, we're going to need to address discriminatory norms as well. So I think the important thing is that agriculture extension and advisory services can really play an important role in helping close the gender gap. It can make information, new technology, skills, knowledge that more accessible, but also much more relevant, so that we are designing with women in mind. And one of the things we see is that once women start to gain the new skills and they become more confident, it really improves their decision-making power within their households, but even in communities where they start to be seen as leaders. However, for that to happen, we really must tailor the agriculture extension and advisory services to really speak to women's needs and priorities, so that we are providing information that is relevant, that is useful for them. So I propose several areas for action. And let me start with this, because I think it's extremely important. I think whatever action we do in communities, we must always start with a gender analysis. The gender analysis, and now the good news is those tools are everywhere. The tools for gender analysis, they are creative, they are amazing, and they're available. So there's no reason for us not to start with a gender analysis. The gender analysis will tell us who plays which roles, who's responsible for what, who has access to what opportunities, what are the differences in priorities, what are the differences in preferences. It can also talk about differences in men's and women's priority technology innovations, or their technology choices, what they prioritize over the other. It can talk about the kinds of constraints, different constraints that men and women face in terms of accessing resources, benefits, but even who is accessing what labor for their plots. It can also provide you an opportunity to really differentiate between barriers or inequalities that women face and those that men face, and really be much more nuanced. If you see there's lack of access to credit, for the woman, it's a very different lack to the men. So if you're going to help address it, you need to be very specific, that you understand what is you're going to do in order to address that. It's also really important now more than ever to start thinking of how to promote women's participation in local innovation processes. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And then gender analysis can also help you understand how decisions are being made in the house. Who has what power? Who can sell what? Who can buy what? Who can produce what where? And finally, just understanding the underlying social cultural norms and values and how they influence all these issues that we've talked about. The second thing I want to talk about is how to ensure that you can increase access to agriculture and extension services by being very targeted in the approaches that one uses. And the first one I would like to say is that we must always start from the needs, priorities, and realities of women. And then secondly, it's really important to think about a more holistic sharing of information or knowledge, because women face multiple constraints at the same time, but they are also doing multiple things at the same time. So you need to be thinking, they want to know where to get inputs, they want to know where to get the seeds, they also want to know other things around finance. So really thinking about multi-dimensional support is extremely important. As I mentioned, the language or the form in which the advisory services come is really important. So thinking about increasing access by using a form and a language that is accessible to women. I see a lot of approaches like the Gender Action Learning System using pictures. Others are using role plays. Really important so that they're able to actually engage with the information. And an important part is, and I know we did this when we started working with farmers long ago, We thought they would never understand. Women farmers will not understand markets, but we were wrong. They understand markets very well. They can go to markets, they can analyze. So really building skills of women in these sectors is extremely important. Using approaches, participatory approaches, considering I worked in FAO, I must start with the farmer field schools, but there is now a plethora of approaches. There is a CARES farmer field and business schools, there's a farmer business schools of FAO, there's participatory innovation development being advanced by Prolinova. So there's a lot of approaches, but the beauty is that these approaches are coming from the perspective of farmers, they're building on their knowledge, and they're very hands-on practical learning, which really means women are able to engage with the knowledge. And finally, I also mentioned the whole idea of we really must think how to challenge and change discriminatory social norms, behaviors, and attitudes. And again, the good news is we really have a whole lot of approaches such as the Gender Action Learning System, where they develop a vision for the household that shows everybody wins if women are not too busy. Everybody wins if a woman can go to the market as well. And then CARE has a social analysis and action approach. Again, the tools are there, and there's no reason why we are not engaging with those tools. So at the moment, FAO has been working with KIT/Prolinova to finalize a publication which is looking at how to really bring women innovators to the limelight, and thinking about how to enhance their participation in local innovation processes. And I think it's really important that we begin to apply this genderless in farmer-led innovation and support women as innovators as well. And some of the things that the guidelines are talking about are looking at, analyzing and documenting and sharing women's innovations so that you're publicizing them. And this means you need to identify who are the women innovators, which means it might be a different way than how you identify men, but also how you give recognition to women innovators, how you help women document their stories of their innovations and support them to disseminate this. It's really a good way to showcase and recognize their contribution to local innovation processes. And then finally, thinking, how do we engage women in farmer-led joint research? Once you've identified an innovation and you want to improve it, how do we get scientists to work with women innovators on their priorities? And here, of course, it's making sure that we are giving priority to women's innovations. We are working with them to identify what are those areas of research they are interested in, but we're also using their criteria to screen innovations. Fourth, as you've seen, women are involved in both on-farm production, agriculture employment, but they're also hugely involved in off-farm agri-food systems. So it's really also important that you do a gender analysis of the entire chain, all the way from production to consumption, to markets and to consumption. And to start to identify where are women and men participating, and where are women constrained, and where are those constraints based on gender, and what is it you can do. And you can see this is an example of some work that was produced by FAO that looks and shows, in this case, women were much more involved at production all the way to processing. But when you start to look at the supermarkets, the large-scale farms, you see that women's role starts to reduce. So again, this tells you what kind of action do you need to do in order to make sure that they are where the profits are. And these are some of the guidelines that have been developed, some by FAO, some by CARE, others by Catholic Relief Services, by CIAT, by Oxfam, etc. So the tools again are there. I think that would be my key message, that the tools are there. Let's use them. I think we've talked about this, the importance of enhancing women's participation and leadership. I've mentioned a little bit about making sure that organizations pay attention. But when you think at farmers level, it's really important to see how to bring in their participation and leadership. And there are several proposals. It's really important you can leverage on existing rural women's organizations or women's groups as you design programs. But more than that, you can work with them, but you really need to focus on building their leadership skills and their self-confidence so that they are able to articulate the issues and they're able to participate effectively as decision makers. They need to have access to information and the knowledge that allows them. And we know that if you can engage them in design of these programs, then it becomes very clear that their perspectives and their needs are considered and they're able to shape the efforts. So I've talked about at the farm level. Now let's look at the institutions, the universities, the ministries. I think, again, the ministries and the agriculture extension service providers, they really must pay attention to integrating gender in their policies and practices. And this really begins with a very clear, well-articulated institutional commitment to gender equality that permeates through the organization. Staff need to know that this is an important agenda for us. Secondly, it's important for institutions to establish mechanisms that support the recruitment, so gender parity, but also to systematically integrate gender in all the systems and the processes. So this requires thinking about policies around recruitment, policies around retention of female extension officers, policies around recruiting gender experts so that you're getting the correct advice and training. And then having pathways, clear pathways for career advancement for women extension officers. Role models. Award does very good work around this. And so there is lots of lessons, and we are not the only ones. There's others that do it. And then the other part that I mentioned is really strengthening the leadership capacities of the women extension officers. Once there's a pathway, let's also build their skills so that they can take on the positions. And finally, making sure that there is scope around strengthening capacities and skills of extension professionals to integrate gender all the way from technology innovation to piloting, to dissemination, to monitoring and evaluation, but also very specifically making sure that there is budget that is set aside for integrating gender. And then the seventh, and this is my second last slide, it talks about policies. We really must think about, if we are serious about this, then we need gender responsive agriculture extension policies. Because these are the ones that are going to play a role in really reducing the discrimination, eliminating the discrimination, and promoting access to resources, to services, to opportunities equally to men and women. And important things around gender responsive extension policies, and I know you're going to hear from my two colleagues, is really making sure what I said, recognize the important role that they play in the sector and make sure there are specific measures to promote the integration of gender. We need to provide capacity for both male and female extension agents so that they have the tools at hand. And we need to ensure that gender is also taken into consideration when we are thinking about the delivery, extension delivery and technology innovation and dissemination processes. An important part of here is making sure we are monitoring and evaluating and tracking gender outcomes. And to do this, one of the things, and I have always said this, and I think we are still struggling with this, is to make sure we are collecting sex disaggregated data to find out who is getting what information, are they interested in it, what are they using it for? because that would be really important for us in terms of shaping the agriculture extension services. So the collection of data is important in terms of strengthening the information base for policies, for programs, and for innovations. So I'm going to end here, but I'll just put in a pitch for my two colleagues who will be sharing some of the lessons of an award program that's focusing on catalyzing the design and implementation of gender-responsive agri-food systems policies. It's called our GRASP program, and they will be talking about the experiences around extension policies. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Your time and presented it like a real expert by highlighting the challenges that are facing women despite their important contribution. You also touched on the tools that can be put to bear in terms of addressing the barriers that are there. And you've well articulated the women's key role in the agri-food system in sub-Saharan Africa, the gender gaps that continue to persist, and the need for a gender-responsive agricultural extension system, the need for it to be made more inclusive, particularly take into account the specific barriers that the women folk are facing. And you highlighted at length the multidimensional strategies that can be deployed to overcome these barriers, like the farmer field schools, the business schools, the gender action learning systems, and the gender transformative approaches. And you've highlighted that women are also innovators, but their innovation is often not acknowledged, that they need to be recognized and supported. We need to take a more gender sensitive value chain analysis and find a way in which we can promote women leadership. They should be supported even through policies, and that there's need for reform at institutional level and community level so that we can see sustainable impact. We need gender responsible agricultural research extension policies to eliminate those barriers, which are based especially on the traditional norms that continue to exclude our women folk even from accessing information that is relevant to them. I think you've already pitched towards your close on how some of your colleagues will come in. But before we listen to them, we are going to hear another presentation just citing some case studies with regard to the issue of gender. This presentation will be rendered by Ms. Karen Munoko, who is a development specialist in agribusiness. She's dealt with gender and youth issues under the CAADP XP4 program, where she was part of the gender thematic working group. So at this juncture, let me call upon Karen Munoko to present to us. She's also online, focusing on the CAADP gender study on agricultural development and women-led innovations, and also this case study involving South Sudan and the other one from Burkina Faso. Our IT colleagues who can facilitate Karen to join online.
Hello, Dr. Podusi, can you hear me?
Something to confirm that you are following with us?
Yes, please. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Dr.
Fantastic.
Podusi, can you see my screen? I'm sharing my screen.
Not yet. We are waiting to see it. Colleagues, just keep your questions and comments towards the end. Will give you a chance for you to make your observations. Yes, the slides, your slides are coming through now.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Podusi. And I would like to stand on existing protocol and acknowledge Dr. Patience Ruamigisa and Dr. Susan Karia. Karen Munoko, and I have been conducting a study under the CAADP X Pillar 4 Gender Working Group, the study of agriculture development and women-led innovations in Africa's agri-food system. This study was sponsored by the European Commission through Desira Lift. I'm pleased to be here, and colleagues, good evening. Just going to go through to my next slide. Yeah, so this study was, why was this study important? We acknowledge that, after 20 years of CAADP implementation in Africa, we are not yet on track, especially where gender is concerned. As this is a brief background, the CAADP XP4 supports agriculture research and innovation for food system, economic development, and climate resilience. And the CAADP XP4 Gender Thematic Working Group was set up specifically to enhance inclusivity and gender mainstreaming efforts within the agriculture research and innovation space. This working group comprises of focal persons from AFAS, CORAF, CADESA, Azareka, and FARA. The objective of my presentation is to highlight case studies of women-led innovations across Africa, showcasing their impact on sustainable gender-inclusive food systems. And this process involved document review and questionnaires, interactive sessions, especially identifying sustainable innovations, documenting case studies, and analyzing evidence-based information. The study took place between July 2024 and February 2025. In our outreach efforts, we were able to identify 11 case studies from 11 countries, as you can see from the map, across various value chains, over 15 value chains, as some of the innovations cut across more than one value chain. So I'm making a presentation of an analysis from 15 case studies. The key insights that were achieved from this, the findings from the study highlighted women as being critical to food systems, as we've heard from previous speakers. However, they still face gender disparities in resource access, leadership, and decision-making. And we used a framework for transversal analysis to get some key drivers, common themes, and enablers that highlight the scaling or promoting, how to scale and promote these women-led innovations. And one key driver is that women-led innovations are highly motivated by traditional knowledge, indigenous products and practices, as highlighted from a case study that was developed from Mali, where the women are processing fonio, and also from Uganda, providing market access to African leafy vegetables. Another key driver is that women are motivated by climate and nutrition smart technologies. This was highlighted in a case study from Zimbabwe, where they're scaling drought-resistant crops and livestock and sustainable water use in Ghana. Agroecological approaches were also highlighted as very key in promoting and driving women-led innovations. This was highlighted also from a case study from Ghana and Uganda. The enablers of success include policy support, especially gender-responsive policies. And this was highlighted in one of the case studies in South Sudan, where women have access to land, and from this, then they are empowered to actually make decisions and implement their businesses, get collateral also for accessing investments. Access to resources is also a very key enabler, especially finance, land, digital tools. Women reported that financial independence empowers innovation, and access to digital tools increase their market access. Social capital and partnerships were also highlighted as key enablers, and I think Dr. Patience will be pleased to hear that male allies, male mentors, community support is very key in enabling the success of women-led innovations, and collaborations with research and private sector and policy. So the impact of this innovation so far within the communities and the scope of operations for these women-led innovations are enhanced productivity, empowerment, and resilience in the food systems. I'll highlight a few case studies. One of them is Kati Farms, based in Uganda. The innovator is Lovin Kobusinje, and Lovin processes fish sausages among many other products. These are processed from tilapia, and she supports over 1,000 women fish farmers and also increases market access for these women. She empowers the women, especially in the male-dominated sector. Les Cereals de Tatam from Mali is the innovator is Halatu Dem, who is processing fonio and millet at an industrial scale, thus reducing the labor by 50% of the women who have been doing this manually. And she has also empowered over 1,000 women and women farmers and increased market access for these women by 90%. Native Feeds, based in Botswana, is led by a young entrepreneur called Nono Puduhudu, who is processing livestock feed from maize straw and lab, and she has managed to improve farmer incomes, nutritious and climate resilient feed solutions. And her business or her innovations stem from indigenous knowledge, actually carried on from the family, is a family generational product that she has packaged into her business and is supporting farmers within her community. The outcomes for this women-led innovations so far that have been highlighted by the study are improved yields and market access, which can be seen from Kati Farms that exports to 5 countries. Women also have been empowered as entrepreneurs, and this will be highlighted by my colleague from Rockafest, who is actually here. She is the Secretary General, and Rockafest is a network of women in seed business and mentoring women in 11 countries in West and Central Africa. Also, agroecological practices and climate smart technologies emerged as key outcomes, and especially in preserving biodiversity and resilience. And there has been a shift in gender norms through the male mentorship and community engagements. These are some of the pictures from women innovations, the case studies from Ethiopia, for example, where women in coffee are doing business and exporting coffee to European countries. Despite the outcomes, there's still some challenges that are glaring, especially in resource access. Women are still they're hindered from, scaling and promoting their work because of the policies around land access, land ownership. There's high cost of inputs and financial barriers. Also, there's still some social, cultural barriers which restrict women's leadership and decision-making, and infrastructure gaps whereby there's weak transport, storage, and digital connectivity that hinders their access to markets, and lack of funding, technical know-how, and robust monitoring systems. So the study recommends that especially for us practitioners, in the agricultural innovation system, to expand training in agroecology, financial literacy, and digital tools, champion knowledge sharing and inclusive practices, enhance gender responsive and farmer-led research in especially neglected and underutilized species, and localized seed systems, digital platforms, storage facilities, engage in innovation platforms and other platforms like community of practices, invest in women-led enterprises, and provide platforms for market access. For policy, this stood out really highly, especially for governments to honor their commitments, such as the 10% budget allocation for agriculture that was agreed upon in Maputo Protocol, and enforce policies for land access and financial inclusion, as well as streamline seed regulations. In conclusion, I think it's prudent to build a for us to leverage, especially in women-led innovations, given that we've seen they have potential to help us develop a sustainable and inclusive food system. And also, so for us to do this, then the call is to establish a Gender Exp4 community, to establish a CAADP Exp4 gender community of practice, and a network of women innovators to foster collaboration and scale these innovations. This will require a mapping of the women-led innovations because, as we had in the earlier, from the earlier speakers, women are different. The urban and the rural, the ones in leadership, in research versus the ones in business, they face different challenges. There are different dynamics around their workspace. So mapping of women-led innovations is very important, and enhancing monitoring systems, especially in aligning with the just launched CAADP Strategy and Action Plan for 2026 to 2035 and the Kampala CAADP Declaration focusing on building resilient and sustainable agri-food systems in Africa. Thank you for listening, Zikomo, and we are going to hear from two case studies who were privileged they could join us here. One is focusing on extension and advisory services in systems in South Sudan. That is Attilio Agostino and Gloria Zalisa, who is the Secretary General of ROCAFES based in Burkina Faso. So I think we will start with Zalisa and give her a few minutes, and then we can move to Attilio. Thank you. Dr. Podisi, you're muted. I don't know if you're saying something. We can't hear you.
You can go ahead. Go ahead with the next. Yes.
Great, thank you. Zalisa, kindly go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, Karen. I would like to extend my heartfelt greetings to the organizers of this very important event. So, as Karen said, I am the Secretary General for ROCAFES. ROCAFES, by definition, is women-led seed companies in West and Central Africa. This initiative was made by women themselves in April 2022 in Abidjan. It was through a training session on seed business. So we decided to set up a network of women in West and Central Africa because we are facing the same challenges in our activities, and we think that it's very, very relevant to put our strength together in order to achieve our objectives. So I'm not going to make a formal presentation, but I will go straight to the point to save time. So we were part of the case studies Karen made last year, and we focused on 3 companies out of the network. But actually, when we were making the study, we were 11 countries involved into the network, but now we are 14 countries in West and Central Africa. So with your permission, I will read some presentation. Okay, so because of the challenges the first and the second presenters shed light on, you know that these challenges are common to all women. So we are facing in seed systems, we have 3 basic seed systems. You know, we have the traditional seed system, and we have the formal seed system and the intermediate seed system. When we talk about the traditional seed system, it is centered on women. even if women contribution is very sensitive and very high, they still face challenges to be accepted as men. Okay, so the objective of our network is to promote women in seed sector and to increase women leadership in general. So as I said before, we focus on 3 companies because in our network, we have large companies, medium-sized companies, and small companies like mine. Because when I was attending the meeting, I was a simple employee. After the meeting, when we set up the company, the network, I decided to start my own business. So, for instance, the company in Mauritania, on that we made the case study is a cooperative. It's larger than my organization. And the one in Senegal is made of 25 organizations of women. So all of our objectives is to have access to quality inputs, including seeds, fertilizers and all that, and to fight or let's say to make lobbyings in order to have access to land and to have access also to financial support and technical partnership. So from to date, we want to have more women involved into our network because our objectives really fit with women in agriculture sector objectives. It's what I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zalisa, and well done. I know it wasn't very easy to do this in English, but we appreciate that you agreed, given that your primary language is French. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know if Agostino managed to log in. If not, Dr. Podisi, is this the time we welcome questions, or should I hand this over to you? We would appreciate to get any feedback, thoughts on the study, and any other comments that would enrich this presentation. Thank you.
Can we? I think it would be good just to tie them up by having the last 2 speakers, then we can discuss them collectively, because we had a setting the scene presentation covering the whole landscape, and now we got case studies which are generating evidence to and observations either for or against some of the proposed interventions. So I propose, in the interest of time, that we get the last 2 other, and this one will be followed by the presentation by Dr. Romana Mbinya.
Online.
Dr. Mbinya is also online. Hopefully our IT team, you can help Dr.
Yeah, I'm around.
get online from Awad.
Yeah, she is.
I don't know whether your team, you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. Just say we can.
Yes, we can hear you. We can see your slide.
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much, the MC, and also the organizers of the conference. I appreciate that you invited me. I also want to extend my gratitude to my sponsor, Award, for giving me this opportunity to participate. So my name is Romana, as I've been introduced. I'm an Award fellow but on the side, I'm a lecturer teaching extension in one of the Kenyan universities called Jaramogi. So I'm here to present some work that I did courtesy of award. We had projects that were called policy innovation projects. And my policy innovation project was about reviewing key agricultural extension policies in Kenya and also in Siaya County where I work. And my question is always how gender responsive our agricultural policies. I hope the screen is moving.
Yes, it is moving.
Okay, so I just want to speak briefly because of the interest of time. The policies that I looked at, the methodology that I used to review my policies, the findings, and basically just give a few recommendations. Now, I do not want to repeat this because my director, Dr. Susan Kaharia, has highlighted strongly why we need gender responsive extension policies. She's talked a lot about women contribution in terms of labor, in terms of what they're doing in regard to food security. And we are saying that because of these constraints, the gender productivity gap is still very high. Some countries like Uganda are registering as high as 30%. And because of these gender inequalities, we are seeing rural food insecurity and poverty still persisting in our continent and in our globally. And that is why I'm here today to, to continue pushing for us to think about reviewing our policies to ensure that they are gender responsive. Because for me, I believe that policies are the rules of the game. And as long as the policies do not capture some of these things, I don't expect us to really achieve much. So my PIP was to review agricultural extension policies, to identify to what extent they integrate gender considerations, and further make suggestions to make them gender responsive. In my project, I worked on several policies and strategies, as you can see them from the screen. From the national level, that is now the Kenyan situation. I worked on the national agricultural sector policy, which I can say is very old because around 13 years old. Currently, we have the draft Kenya agricultural sector policy that was drafted in 2022, but it has not been effected yet. And at the local level, I worked on the Siaya County agricultural sector strategy policy. The reason why I worked also at the county level is because now extension is a devolved service. The county governments are responsible for the day-to-day delivery of extension services. And therefore, also looking at the policy at that level is very key. I also looked at the Siaya County agribusiness strategy, the agri-soil management policy, and the meteorology policy. Now, as Dr. Susan highlighted earlier, there are several tools that we use in analyzing these policies. But in my case, I used the GAPO, which was developed by FAO. GAPO is a gender in agricultural policy analysis tool. And I use this tool because it has a framework that assesses gender issues and how they're integrated in the main components of an agricultural policy document. So I was able to look at the policy objectives, the budgets, and the activities to see whether the objectives integrate, the objectives have anything that's related to gender. I was also able to evaluate the activities to see whether there are any activities that are mentioned that are geared towards promoting gender equality. Yeah, so I used the GAPO tool, and it's a tool that has been used a lot in analyzing policies, especially within the developed countries. Now, I want to highlight a few findings, and I'm happy that Dr. Kaharia was able to highlight a few. In fact, it looks like we were doing our presentations or preparations from the same room. So my findings from these key policies and strategies is that on the positive side, they acknowledge the contribution of both women and men in agriculture. These policies and the documents also acknowledge the challenges that women and youth encounter when it comes to production in agriculture. And I'm happy also other speakers have talked about access to resources. The policies are also highlighting and acknowledging that there exist social norms which influence equitable access to extension services by women and youth. And they have acknowledged that some of these social and cultural norms do in a great deal influence how women and youth participate in agriculture. Now, however, when I looked at the policies and the strategies keenly, I realized that there exist gaps. And one of the gaps is that, some of the measures that are outlined to promote extension services delivery are majorly very generic, and they lack specific measures to promote gender equity. In most cases, you'll find examples such as, they will ensure that women participate in extension services. They will ensure that youth are included. However, to me, some of those measures are very generic. The other thing is that these policies lack explicit objectives that promote gender equality. And in such regard, as Dr. Kaharia was talking about, if there's no one objective, then you don't expect any strategy to come out to be enacted in such a policy if the objectives are not very explicit. The policies also lack structures to include women and men, especially women in policy formulation, implementation. And I think that has been talked in breadth. And because of also this, I would say the shortcomings that are violated, you'll find that all these policies and strategies, none of them has a specific budget that is proposed to actualize the actions in the M&D tools. And therefore, even when you look at the M&D frameworks that are in those policies, none of them has any activity that is related to evaluating gender or any other gender aspect. Now, what surprised me is that all these policies, especially the extension policies, have considered gender as a cross-cutting issues. And gender has been put alongside HIV, environment. And therefore, when you look at it, them just measuring casually gender, you feel that the gender aspect has been diluted, and therefore the extension policies do not give much attention to gender. In conclusion, I would say in regard to findings that these policies and strategies is that gender is insufficiently integrated in agricultural policies and strategies in Kenya specifically. Now, from my findings, I've recommended I put across a few recommendations, and I'm also happy that Dr. Kaharia talked about it, that recommendation number one is to include gender equality and rural women rights explicitly as a policy objective tool. The other bit is also because the policies are talking about discriminatory social norms, but they are very quiet about how to address them. So my recommendation is that if it's possible for these policies to put clearly consideration and measures to address discriminatory gender social norms and inequalities. The other speakers have talked about enhancing the capacities of extension personnel, because these are the people that are responsible for developing these policies. And as long as they lack the capacity, you don't expect much to come from that. And from also talking to them, we realize that majority of these extension agents are not trained. And from the policies on extension, skills in gender is not listed as one of the prerequisite skills an extension officer required. So we expect that we recommend that not just the capacity building of extension agent, this should also be part and parcel of their technical training. The other recommendation is to develop county strategies to institutionalize gender at all levels. I think this has been talked a lot in programs, in policies, and also consider integrating gender considerations in implementing in the M&D frameworks, so that when you're collecting data, as Dr. Kaharia says, you ensure that the data is sex disaggregated. And also we can ensure that we also consider gender intersectionality, because women are not just women. They are women farmers, they are women living with disabilities, there are women also who have other descriptions that also matter. So those are the few recommendations that I've been able to make from my work. Now, the outputs and the outcomes from my PIP implementation is that so far I've been able to publish one policy brief, is available. We are in the process of also making a training manual in collaboration with Grace, who will speak after me, and two other policy fellows from Nigeria, Grace and Aisha. And once that is ready, it will be shared so that extension staff and policymakers can use it. And lastly, through the support of award, I was able to train extension officers from my local county on gender in extension services and program delivery. And I was able to do this with one of my students, or one of my staff that I do mentor, Mr. Kennedy. And my parting shot from my work is that we need to make our policies, agricultural policies, gender responsive. And we need to see this because one, we need to be very intentional. We need data that can give us the right evidence to make the right decisions. We need also to acknowledge the diversity that exists between men, youth, and women. We also need policies that are recognize and address the different needs, the roles and the contributions of women, men, and youth, as earlier talked about. And I'm sure if we can review our policies and make them gender responsive, then we can be able to address issues of inequalities and promote gender equity within our extension and advisory services. So thank you, and my regards goes to Award for sponsoring my work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mbi. Thank you for providing us with that data, which confirms some of the observations. And I'm going to request Grace, in your intervention, please don't repeat what has already been confirmed by others, but try to highlight any salient observations based on your own analysis. Grace Chilongo, our IT team, if you can facilitate her to join in, and I will request her to sort of summarize her observations so that we can give the audience a chance to intervene before we hear from the key discussant as we move towards wrapping up. Okay.
Hello, I don't know whether you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so my name is Grace Chilongo from Malawi, and I'm so excited today to be given this opportunity to present my work. Of course, you have told me not to go into the details. Yeah, that's totally fine. But then I will just start from, I don't know, where specifically.
Put it on project presentation mode, please.
Okay, let me do that. Is that okay?
Yeah, it is good now. You can go ahead, please. Yeah.
Okay, fine. So I will just say that Malawi, like any other African nations, has commendable policy steps through frameworks. For example, in Malawi, we have got the National Agricultural Policy, National Climate Change Management Policy, and of course, we have got our own national vision, Malawi 2063. So all these policies advocate for climate smart agriculture, gender equality, but also inclusive extensional services. However, despite these policy aspirations, we face a critical gap, which is there is no clear mechanism ensuring the meaningful participation of women in agri-food policy design, implementation, and monitoring. So our policies may be, yes, gender aware, but they remain insufficiently in terms of gender responsive. So this gap is especially visible in agricultural extension services, a key entry point for climate smart practices and technologies. Women who make up the majority of our smallholder farmers in Machinga, of course, also in Africa, struggle to access the extensional services, innovations, and decision-making spaces that could support their adaptation to climate change and uplift their productivity, but also livelihood. So the exclusion of women from responsive agricultural extension and the climate smart innovation systems results in lower productivity, but also increase the vulnerability, increase the productivity to climate shocks and reduce their participation in agribusiness opportunities. So this exclusion not only threatens their household food security and gender equality, but also undermines Malawi broader development ambitions. For example, our Malawi National 2063, and of course, sustainable development goals in general. So to address this, for me, I undertook a policy innovation project which was funded by, which is being funded by award. Thank you so much for that. With the three main objectives. The first one was to assess the gender responsiveness of current climate smart agriculture policies and the extension of frameworks in Malawi. And the second one was to identify gaps, but also the policy opportunities to empower women in agri-food systems. And the last three was to propose some strategies to operationalize gender equality in agricultural extension service delivery. So in terms of my approach, the first thing that I did was to conduct a policy analysis. So this one has already been highlighted by Dr. Garia and of course my colleague, Dr. Romana. So I used the two powerful tools, that's GAPO 2 and WIGOV 2. So for the GAPO 2 and Dr. Romana has already highlighted that. I will not go into the details. But in addition to doing the policy analysis using these two powerful tools, I also did a stakeholder engagement whereby I held a validation meeting with the policy makers, extension officers, and researchers, but also civil society actors in Machinga district. In terms of my findings, to be honest, these findings were so striking. One thing that I observed was that while our policies, they are mentioning the concept of gender, they lack actionable strategies, accountability mechanisms, and the resource implementations plan. In addition to that, women's voices are also marginalized in decision-making and the policy dialogues, especially at the district level, as my PIP was focusing on the district level Machinga in Malawi. And there is also a disconnect between gender commitments, but also extensional delivery. So these gender responsive extension services are rarely operationalized, and the most field level extension officers, they lack that training in gender analysis, but also engagement. So to address this gap, I'm offering three key policy recommendations. The first one is to strengthen women's participation in the policy processes. So this one, I'm looking specifically to institutionalize the platforms that guarantee the representation of women farmers and the local women's organization in agricultural policy design and review. But also under there is to promote community-driven and inclusive policy dialogues, especially at the district level. Secondly, there is also a need to operationalize gender commitments in climate smart agriculture policies, whereby we have to translate gender objectives into targeted support schemes, clear indicators, and of course with the budget lines. And these local governments must be held accountable again through monitoring frameworks, but also performance assessments. And lastly, I'm also advocating for mainstreaming gender in extensional service delivery. So there is a need to train extensional workers on gender responsive methodologies, and also to increase outreach, but also support services, especially those services that are tailored to women. I'll just give an example of mobile-based extension, women-led demonstration projects, and of course, PM learning models. So in terms of these PIP outcomes, I will not go into the details. Dr. Romana has already said that we are in the process of developing training manual, but then on my own, I've also produced a policy brief, which is titled Advancing Gender Responsive Climate Smart Agriculture, of course, in Machinga. So as a closing statement from my end, I would just say that gender equality in agriculture is not just a women's issue. It is a development imperative. If we are to scale climate smart agriculture and also drive inclusive commercialization across Africa, our policies and our extension system must work for women. This Malawi case from Machinga is not unique, but it is instructive. It reminds us that policies must go beyond intentional. They must be backed by our action, by our accountability and resources. We need all of us to commit to scaling gender responsive agricultural extension, not only to empower women, but also to secure our sustainable, food secure and equitable future for everyone. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you so much, Awad, for inviting me to this powerful platform. I'm really humbled for that. Thank you so much. Over to you, Mr. MC.
Thank you very much, Grace. Give her a round of applause. And of course, give an applause to our previous speakers as well. Yes. And as we start, I just want to acknowledge some of our delegates, those who are online, but more specifically even for those who are in the room. I want to acknowledge the AFAS board members, Mrs. Mary Kamau, who are in the room, and the UFAS board chairperson, Dr. Richard Muiro. I want to acknowledge also the Gender Technical Working Group members from AFAS and CADAP XP4, who were also led by Professor Stella Adebode and Dr. Miriam Maiga, who will be our last discussant as we move towards wrapping up, and of course, the award team and Dr. Margaret Mangeni. So, those of you who are online, please unmute and maybe raise your hand and we'll select you to make your intervention. We've had a rich list of presentation from the keynote address, and then we went to pick case studies across the continent to check how we are doing in terms of gender mainstreaming. And even some of the tools in the last presentation were put to use to try to see how the actual existing policies are embracing gender. And with having the right tools, the right measurements, and allocating the right budgets to support women is still lacking. Our ICT team, if you can show us the people who are online, those who I want to give them priority to make their first reactions before we invite participants who are here in the room to make their initial reactions to the presentation. As you can see, we have a very attentive audience online. We appreciate your attention for joining us online. Is there anyone who is online? Just maybe unmute and make your intervention. I don't see any hand. Online participants, this is your chance. At this juncture, since I'm not seeing any hand or any comment, I'll give this chance to the participant in the room. I see a hand here on my left. Okay. There's Mamode?
Yes.
Mamode, you will come next after we get a reaction from the room, and then you'll be followed by Karen Munoko, who has her hand up as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Beatrice Luzobe. Agriculture Advisory Services. I just wanted to comment on even what Dr. Patience started with. When we say that women are not in the rural areas, there are statements which we always make. Of course, we say, for example, there's a general expression which says extension workers don't work. You know, extension workers, especially the public, they don't work. And then we say that women are not in the field. I think we need to move and say why, and then handle it from there. And at times, like when we say extension workers don't work, we actually know why they don't. and we don't address that. So even in this case, when we say that women are not in the rural areas, why? Can we address that, you know, the challenges which are there? Can we provide an enabling environment for them? Because we've seen some of the, like, for example, the NGOs, whatever, when they purposely say they want to actually employ women and take them to the rural areas, they go there and work. Of course, the women are fewer. But I think if we purposely address the issue, and we will be able to have those. But if we don't address the issues which don't take them to the rural areas, then we won't be able to, you know, to do anything. There are issues, there are reasons why they are not in the rural areas, and let's address that.
Thank you. I think you've made a point that we need to tease out why there are few women extension workers in the rural areas, because nobody has responded to that. I saw let me allow Mamode followed by Karen, and then I'll take the lady from the floor here. Mamode, you have your chance to make your intervention.
Yeah, good evening all. It's been a great pleasure to be part of these presentations, and I really want to appreciate all the presenters. I want to say here that the scenarios that have been captured are similar to what we are passing through in Nigeria. I want to say that we have to put more efforts policy-wise to make sure that the females are being carried along, because they have to be carried along, because they are more in the field of producing food. In all value chains, you have women in agriculture putting their inputs. So extension need to cover both females and make sure that their provisions are being made for them to make sure that they do their work in a very comfortable way, with all the support that is needed from both the government and the society at large. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. That was a comment and encouragement that we need to do more to carry women along. Let me allow Karen Munoko first before we allow the board member. Karen Munoko, you had your hand up?
Yes, please. Thank you, Dr. Podisi. I first of all would like to really appreciate Dr. Maiga, who managed to join, who's giving the discussions. As a discussant, she's the chair of the Gender Technical Working Group and has really been instrumental in making that study a success. And acknowledge Isolina from Desira Lift, who are the sponsors of the study. Their support has been really great in helping us implement our work plan. Dr. Podisi, kindly, if you'll allow me, there's a presenter who never managed to speak, but we have Nyarai Chisoro Chengwe from Zimbabwe, who can also, if you'll allow, give like 3 minutes remark based on her case study. And I think it's very relevant even to the question that was asked earlier on how and why this support is not reaching the rural communities. Her case study provides some very practical examples on how she has managed to do that with the climate smart technologies. Kindly.
We'll maybe give them just 3 minutes after the few interventions this side. Let's allow the board member, Madam Kamau, to make your intervention.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank the presenters for their wonderful presentations. For mine, I was just looking at it like a common problem, not only in agriculture extension, but general across the board. And I think the issue of gender is more of a perception and attitude. Because like in Kenya, we have even a policy within the constitution that says that that percent of even employment or board representation, that percent should be either gender. But even with the rules there, you still see people not doing the right thing. They still overlook it. So I think it's for different countries to come up with the policies and look at the way they can be able to empower either gender, whether women or men, where they are affected, and make deliberate efforts and policies which can be able to go along, and much more create awareness, both at the highest policy levels to the ground, and look at the comparative advantage of the programs where women can be able to be taken, to take advantage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Kamau. I want to give Elizabeth Asimwe to just summarize the comments which are online for us so that we can take them on board as we try to move towards giving the final comments and reflection from Dr. Maiga as the key discussant.
Okay, thank you so much, moderator. There are a number of comments online, and most of the participants are appreciative of the presentations. We have one, Hajara Nantume, saying that the studies highlight women disparities so well. Why are we neglecting the other groups, especially the youth and poor men? Okay, she also notes that the case study missed some statistics. I think this is for you, Karen, and these statistics to back up the qualitative explanations. We also have Aziza Mohammed Brahim, who says that based on the different case studies, what do you think is still needed to set actionable strategies that could help to enhance women's situations in agri-food systems? Okay, most of the responses there is really appreciative.
Thank you.
There is one other one from Zuhairi Sharifa asking what motivated women to engage in seed production and where do they want to be in 2 years from now? I think that is also to Karen.
Yes, there was a comment. Karen, you had mentioned that one of your colleagues wanted to make an intervention, especially which will help respond to some of the questions that have been raised. Are they online?
Yes. Yes, they
Please,
are. Nyarai is here. Nyarai, kindly.
Just 2 minutes. We don't, because we need to wrap up this side.
Okay. Hello, colleagues. We did an intervention in Zimbabwe on goat production as well as sweet potato vine production to curb climate smart for climate smart agriculture. So you'll realize that many women are into these projects. So we are ensuring that each and every farmer in the rural area join such projects so that they can be climate resilient. Otherwise, I don't have much since I had not prepared this presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm done.
Are you done?
Yes, I'm done. There's a lot to share, but then I realized there's no time. But I have a case study which I presented to Karen. So maybe if it is shared, you can be able to get more from there.
Thank you. Thank you. I've noted that a good number of interventions were proposals on other aspects that we need to look into. I just want to invite Dr. Maiga from CORAF, who's the gender specialist, the regional gender and social development advisor for CORAF, who's our key discussant, also to reflect on the discussion so far without repeating what has already been covered by others as we want to wrap so that we can close the session. Over to you, Dr. Maiga.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank AFAS for the opportunity to have CAADP EC4 Gender Working Group involved in organizing this gender side event. We really appreciate it. I'm having some network problems, so allow me to put off my camera. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. It is well documented that science, research, and innovation can unlock the potential of agriculture with proven technology to feed Africa. We cannot meet the objective. We can meet the objective only if farmers, especially the underprivileged, including women and youth, have access to proven technology to enhance food productivity to meet food demand. The access to technology and innovation present enormous potential in terms of agribusiness development in the entire agro-silvopastoral and heritage value chains for women and youth empowerment. And this talks about the crucial role that agricultural extension and advisory system plays in Africa's sustainable food system agenda. So gender relation and gender-based social norms are the main causes of for women's limited access to and use of agricultural extension. And the gender-based social norms restrict women's mobility, reduce their time, limit the interaction with male extension service providers, the sources of information they can access, and the ability to attend agricultural meetings. Extension and advisory service providers influenced by traditional roles, gender roles, can fail to target women adequately or to deliver their services in a way that takes account the specific needs and voice for women active participation. So while the digitalization of agricultural extension and advisory services has become crucial for the transformation of agriculture in Africa, extension digitalization tools such as the eVoucher and e-extension operating with SMS and online platform to make extension services more accessible, timely, and cost-effective, particularly in reaching remote areas for farmers with limited access to traditional services, are not always gender responsive. And this is really unfortunate. So making therefore difficulties for women to take advantage. Women have sometimes barely access to smartphone or don't know how to use it. So it's not worth it that compared to men, and I think this was raised in one of the presentations, there is limited number of women working as extension agents. In some communities, restrictions for women farmers to interact with male extension officers remain a challenge. So these limitations together contribute to the gender gap in agricultural productivity, where women manage farms are 30% less productive than farms managed by men. Closing this gap will enable us to boost agriculture production, to improve food security and welfare of rural households. Agricultural extension and advisory policies and practices that we need for Africa are the ones which can truly put at scale proven technologies known as climate smart, gender smart, and nutrition smart technologies, and leading to agricultural commercialization, industrialization, and the transformation towards inclusive, resilient, and sustainable food system. General response to agricultural intention and the advisory services can contribute to respond to the increasing youth unemployment across Africa, with participation of underprivileged as women and youth in agricultural commercialization and industrialization for empowerment. Ladies and gentlemen, in line with the above, we believe that systemic institutional changes are therefore needed in the way extension advisory services are designed and delivered to bring about a sustainable change. So to meet the objective, we need to consider the following action for implementation. To start with, agricultural extension institutions should go for gender institutionalization approach, meaning that gender mainstreaming issues should cut across all of the interventions of agricultural extension and advisory services. Agricultural extension institutions should have clear gender action plan with budget allocation. It doesn't make sense to have a gender action plan without budget allocation if you really want to meet the objective, and contribute clearly to promote investment in agribusiness at scale, with strong engagement of private sector for youth and women empowerment. And this calls for inclusive public-private sector driven, commercialized, industrialized, and transform agri-food system. Gender capacitation, another key action. Gender capacitation of extension institution is key. Stakeholders involved in agricultural extension system development policies and services should be capacitated to design and deliver gender-responsive extension advisory services to enable rural women and youth to effectively benefit. Gender capacitation of extension officers helps to identify constraints such as time, mobility, literacy, and lack of education that prevent women from accessing rural extension services. Another key actions, consider agricultural extension institutions should work to promote organizational culture of extension services that support women to work as extension agents and managers. The gender gap here in extension services tells very much about this gap. So, and contribute to advancing scientific and leadership capacity development for women and youth in extension system with commitment for gendered access to scholarship in extension science education. Agriculture extension and advisory services should consider gender-responsive dissemination and communication of research output and uptake and scaling of innovation. And this calls for inclusive communication strategy by using local languages and tailor-made messages in broadcast program, along with gender-responsive communication tools, such as video-based gender-sensitive extension services for end users who are mostly illiterate to get access to extension and advisory services and take advantage. Extension system development policies, project and program should consider gender-responsive monitoring and evaluation system with sex and age disaggregated indicators in project result framework to track gender progress and gender impact of agricultural extension and advisory services. Last but not the least, extension system should also consider gender-responsive knowledge management, meaning that tools, publication, policy brief, flyers, fact sheets should be developed with gender lens and gender stories, and document best practices in gender mainstreaming in extension services for capitalization. Ladies and gentlemen, gender-responsive agricultural extension and advisory service, policy and practice is more than needed for building inclusive and resilient agri-food system to feed Africa. I thank you for your kind attention. Merci de votre attention. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Maiga. A round of applause for Dr. Maiga for summing it up with those observations. As you've heard, that putting it in policy is not enough, but we need to see the actual action on the ground. So as we are heading towards closure, I just want to hear whether we can get any reaction from our key sponsor for this event, Dr. Susan Karia. Any parting shot, followed by Dr. Isolina Boto for Desira Lift, who is also a partner on this event. Dr. Karia, do you have any parting shot before we take the closing remarks?
Thank you very much for this. Thank you very much for this excellent event. I have learned a lot, and I think the things that have come out are really important that we should follow with. So we have lots of action, lots of examples, and lots of ways in which we can move this agenda forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Karia. Isolina Boto, Isolina, are you there? I want to hear from Isolina Boto. Maybe she has gone. Professor Stella, please, you have a minute or two just to make your input because we need to close.
Yeah, thank you very much. The organizer of the program, I actually want to commend the effort of Awad in helping to support this program. I would definitely expect and suggest that for us to move gender forward, there's the need to involve more of the youth at this time and children. Of course, you know, gender is not about women. The awards may be a suggestion that if we can involve more of our youth, you know, talking about digitalization of agriculture extension, they get it very fast, and it's possible for us to encourage them. And the next generation will be better for it. So on this note, I want to thank the members of the gender group for this side event, and I want to thank the supporter of this program. And I know that with us working together, the issue of gender will make a wave in Africa and in the whole world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Prof. So at this juncture, I'm going to give an opportunity to get the closing remarks by the AFAS Vice Chairperson, Ms. Gifty Gila. Ms. Gila had to step out to pick something at the airport, and we have her recording in terms of her remarks. So I'm going to call the ICT team just to project her presentation as closing remarks, the official closing. And thank you all for your patience, for staying online, and also for staying in the room to listen to her closing. And we are going to take a group photo at the end. Thank you. The ICT team, please. The closing remarks.
You
Volume.
for your active participation, your valuable contributions, and your advancing gender equality in agricultural advisory services. I would especially like to raise my voice to thank our speakers for their insightful presentations and for sharing their experiences with us. Dear speakers, your voices have helped us reflect more deeply and think more broadly. Throughout our discussions, we have seen the role of women in agriculture and to ensure that extension services are inclusive, accessible, and responsive to their needs. Let us now move forward with concrete ideas and actions to implement what we have shared and learned today together. I encourage you to continue the dialogue, to build partnerships, and to be agents of change within your institutions and your communities. Thank you once again, and I'm very honored to close officially this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. A round of applause for everyone and for all of you for having stayed on to the very end, including those of you who are online. Please stay online. Stay online. We want to take a group photo. I will request our ICT technicians, please, you can show a video of everyone, can put on your video so that we can be able to